Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments here in Israel, the region, and beyond, it's always important to remember that today we mark day 586 since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates launched their various atrocities on October 7th of 2023. 58 hostages remain in Hamas captivity to date, and U.S. President Donald Trump concluded his visit, of course, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We'll discuss that at length, including his current visit in Qatar, the implications of his various announcements, to include, of course, the removal of sanctions on Syria, particularly also on Damascus, with the leader, the de facto ruler of Damascus, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, known today as Ahmad al-Shara, and Yemen has launched this morning early another ballistic missile in the direction of Israel at a time when President Trump was still in Riyadh. What does that mean? But before all that, let's turn to introduce our experts for today. Mr. Amir Oren, TV7's editor-at-large. Next to him, retired Brigadier General Mark Himmet, formerly an Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. And last but not least, retired Colonel Abbas Dahouk, formerly a Senior Military Advisor at State Department and the U.S. Army Attaché to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's great to see all three of you. And I'd like to start with you, Mr. Oren, talking about the current circumstances. Give us a brief overview.
So thank you, and I can only wish that my two distinguished co-panelists were indeed next to me, rather than more than an ocean away, in greener pastures. But be it as it may, there are two important events taking place, one in the immediate vicinity of Israel, and one, as you said, in the Arabian Peninsula. The leader of the military wing of Hamas, of the Azadin Qassam brigades, Mohammed Sinwar, whose brother Yahya Sinwar led the attack and massacre on October the 7th, was attacked yesterday afternoon, Israel time, by the Israeli Air Force. And as we are speaking now, the battle damage assessment is still going on, and it is not certain whether he was indeed in the underground facility where several of his colleagues gathered, apparently chaired by him, but again, not 100% certain. If he was there, he probably did not survive. But intelligence is sometimes accurate up to a minute before the actual go, and it is still not absolutely certain. So if Mohammed Sinwar has been eliminated, it might impact on the positions that Hamas is taking in the renewed negotiations, as the Israeli team, the negotiating team, is in Doha already. This is the Israeli event, as you mentioned. The Yemenite or Houthi missile shot at Israel, but successfully intercepted by the Israel Air Force Air and Missile Defense units. Now, as for the region, what we had last night, obviously, was President Trump's speech at the Saudi-US investment event, along with Mohammed bin Salman and many dignitaries, both official, military, as well as business. And the upshot was President Trump's wish for commerce over chaos, and that means diplomacy over death. And he is trying, he is proactive, he does not wait for events to overtake him. He is taking initiatives, and one of them was, as you said, removing the sanctions in force on Syria for the last 14 years or so, since the start of the Syrian civil war. And today, meeting with Ahmed Ashara, as you said, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, his nom de guerre, or nom de terror, is more like it, along with MBS. And on the line, they had Ashara's sponsor, Turkish President Erdogan.
Thank you, Mr. Oren. General Kimmett, let's start with the first point that Mr. Oren raised. Mohammed Deif was considered to be the blocking voice in the talks, particularly when we're talking about the Witkoff outline that sought to see the release of all remaining hostages in Hamas captivity in exchange for far-reaching concessions. Also, the maneuver towards an end of the war, or at least discussions thereon. And last but not least, the removal of Hamas, both military and governing capabilities, as a final stage in this saga. Do you believe that this would now alter the course of discussions if this Deif arch terrorist was indeed eliminated?
Well, I think we're going to have to wait and see. I mean, first of all, you've got to substantiate whether he was killed or not. Second, you always worry about if a leader is taking out, who follows him. This may simply make things worse because the new Hamas leader, military leader, has to prove he's tougher than the guy before him. And so it could quite frankly complicate things significantly. And third, I think what will be exploited is somehow this notion that the Americans were talking to Hamas, which led to the release of the American Israeli citizen yesterday. But behind those fruitful discussions, we now have the Israelis conducting separate attacks, which may or may not be coordinated with the United States. So I think it's muddy right now. I don't think we're going to know for a couple of days what the outcome is, and it certainly will not be what we expect it to be.
Indeed. U.S. President Donald Trump, during the summit yesterday in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, reinforced his position in which he's going to relentlessly do everything in his power, and that of the United States, of course, in order to ensure the release of all hostages. Now, before I turn to Colonel Dahouk, Mr. Oren, there are still bodies of dual Israeli-American nationals in Hamas captivity, is that not?
Yes. There are 58 hostages in Hamas captivity. 20 of them are Israelis. Probably all of 20 of them are alive. Probably all of them Israelis. 38 are dead. Two of whom were apparently Asian guest workers in the Israeli south, and the rest are mostly Israelis, but there are 4 or 5 American citizens or dual citizens who are presumed dead, and their bodies are also supposed to be given either to Israel or directly to the American authorities for decent burial. So this, again, is one of the topics supposed to be negotiated in this round, where Hamas is facing the demand to release 10 hostages who are alive, and at least those 4 or 5 bodies of Americans.
Thank you, Mr. Oren. Colonel Dahouk, when we're talking about the complexities at hand, naturally, there are leverages that a number of Arab countries do possess in order to assist the United States in the process of the releasing of hostages, particularly when we're talking about the Islamist Hamas. What are they able, or how are they able, rather, to assist the United States in this context?
I mean, we've already seen that Egypt and Qatar are heavily involved in the process, and they do have face-to-face communication and other means to communicate with the Hamas leadership. But their role is not as effective as the U.S. role, and also the Israeli military pressure role involved in this negotiations. So they do have a role, but I think it's a supporting role. It's not the role that will bring all the hostages back home. So again, I mean, it's a supportive role, but the United States, I think, if they do coordinate more with the Israeli military pressure, that might produce much more results than have all this fragmented approach to the hostage release negotiations.
Thank you, Colonel Dahouk. And if I may follow up on that, when we're talking now, shifting gears to the Yemeni file, the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, which is dominated naturally by the Houthi tribe in Yemen, has launched 3 ballistic missiles towards Israel in the last 48 hours alone, at a time when U.S. President Donald Trump is in Riyadh. What can you tell us about that, and how does the United States perceive that in this point in time?
I mean, I think if you read the president's unilateral, basically disengaging from the fight against the Houthis, it did send an indirect, I think, message that the pressure is off from United States, and the Houthis had no other choice but to send a signal that they did not culminate, did not surrender. Yet there's still full force, ready to at this time not to fight against American interests, but at least to launch rockets against the Israelis. I think I look at it as just a show of force. Just to show to the Yemenis themselves, the other Yemenis in Yemen, and also to continue to support the Iranian strategic objective to have a better seat on the table when they negotiate with the United States on the nuclear deal. So it's a show of force. Obviously, you know, Israel is ready to. They've been able to deflect or counter these missiles, but the psychological effect is much bigger than its actual tactical or strategic tactical impact on the ground. So I look at it as really a show of force, just to say that the Houthis are still engaged and still to their message, and they wanted to be player in that area.
Thank you, Colonel Dahouk. General Kimmon, naturally, the hope of the disengagement, so to speak, or at least temporary disengagement from confronting this Iranian proxy in Yemen, aimed at opening up the artery of maritime shipping through the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, the Red Sea, and the adjacent waterways. However, it seems like commercial vessels are still shying away from accepting that this waterway is open, and it seems like the insurance companies are also not very eager to lower the prices at this point in time.
Well, I think that's right. One day does not a peace make. I think we're going to have to see a couple of weeks, perhaps a month or two, of quiet operations out of the Houthis to get the insurance companies to lower their premiums and get the ships floating again. Listen, Jonathan, I'd like to go back to that last point you made about you went from Hamas to the Houthis. If I was sitting in your chair, what has not been said is, I think, a concern that Israel has, perhaps merited, that the United States is going it alone. Up to this point, before this trip, the United States has been lockstep with Israel in terms of operations against the Houthis and operation and negotiations with Hamas. What we're seeing now is that the United States has taken a separate unilateral track with Hamas and a separate unilateral track with the Houthis. I hope that's only perception. I hope that's not reality. I think the United States, in extremis, or even if it just starts heating up again, would make it very clear, to use the old saying, that we have an ironclad relationship with Israel, and whether it's the Houthis or Hamas, this is a coordinated effort and not simply a unilateral "Make America Great" operation.
Thank you, General Kimmon. I do think that the current stage where this perception does appear to circulate is merely an appearance in light of the fact that US President Donald Trump is in the region right now in Saudi Arabia, traveled earlier today to Qatar. There are security considerations. Therefore, the State of Israel has also not yet launched its Gideon Chariots operation into the Gaza Strip. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has mentioned yesterday that they are waiting to launch this operation as soon as possible, which has to do, of course, with President Trump's visit in the region. And beyond that, we need to also take into consideration that the United States needs to identify also that the Chinese are closely monitoring its various operational activities and responses to various activities by its various adversaries in the region, which ultimately may have its impact in other sectors around the globe. The question is, however, to what degree is this now merely temporary, or when will we see this restart? And that is something that I have Hugh here for. So go ahead.
Well, if you're asking me when it will restart, first of all, I hope that there are quiet assurances being made in the background to Israel that this is temporary, it is ephemeral, but it is for the public-facing negotiations that we're doing during this trip. I would suspect, and I would certainly hope, that once President Trump is back here in the United States, if an incident comes up that would give the appearance that we have that the Houthis and or Hamas or both or Iran has driven a wedge between the United States and Israel, that's quickly and publicly downplayed and refuted by hopefully the White House itself.
Thank you, General. Mr. Owen, when we're talking about an Israeli response to the Houthi rocket fire, or ballistic missile fire, rather, what can you tell us about that, particularly following the announcement by the IDF Defense or Israel Defense Forces with regard to a number of ports which should be evacuated?
So, building on what General Kimmich just said, he mentioned the ironclad commitment by the United States. Right now, it's an irony-clad commitment, because look what happened over the last 5 or 6 months. Israel has eliminated Hassan Nasrallah and weakened Hezbollah considerably, thereby helping Mohammed Abu Jalani and his cohort to topple Assad. And because of that, Ashara Julani is being photographed with MBS and Trump. It's really ironic. The trajectory of history is quite unprecedented. Now, regarding the Israeli threat, which already has been acted upon twice at least to strike the sea and airports in Yemen, those in operation by the Houthis. This is probably not deterring, and it is not stopping the Houthis from launching rockets at Israel. Only once or twice, once it was with a drone and once with a missile, did they manage to hit Israeli targets. And by the way, the US administration has already said that there are many American citizens, according to their count, up to 700,000 people who carry American passports living in Israel. And if one of them is being hit by a Houthi missile, all bets are off, and they are going to strike the Houthis again. So we have to see whether the US-Israeli joint air and missile defense, because the Americans are still helping Israel protect itself from the missiles, is successful. And just to conclude this particular point, Israel has not managed to open Bab el-Mandeb to its own shipping. And therefore, either it undertake ground operation in the Hodeida area in order to secure the coastal strip where from Bab el-Mandeb is being covered, or it waits for some diplomatic breakthrough.
Indeed. Well, we will let time indicate what is the course of action in this context. I will highlight that that is something that many people don't realize. Around the globe, we do have almost 700,000 Americans living in the state of Israel, both Jews, Arabs, Druze, Christians, various minorities, and therefore the United States does understand the volume, not only citizens, but also a lot of vital infrastructure, minerals, and other aspects that are owned by the United States, something that, of course, establishes here a very significant interest of the United States to secure this territory. But you mentioned, of course, the meeting between Abu Muhammad al-Julani and U.S. President Donald Trump. Colonel Dahouk, 5 points were mentioned during that meeting by the American president, demanding of Al-Shara, as he's called today, to sign onto the Abraham Accords with Israel, tell all foreign terrorists to leave Syria, deport Palestinian terrorists, help the United States to prevent the resurgence of ISIS, and assume responsibility for ISIS detention centers in northeast Syria. Uh, that's a very tall order when we're talking about an individual such as Shah.
Yeah, indeed, that's a tall order for a new head of state that has no really security forces or a military to be able to work together to deploy to protect its territorial integrity, to process all these thousands, I think, for 20 to 30,000 ISIS prisoners, families. So it is a tall order. I'm without assistance from the outside, whether from Turkey or now Saudi Arabia has heavily invested in this rapprochement right now with Ashara. So without that outside help, this is going to be a tough task. And also, we still have a U.S. presence in northeast Syria. Perhaps maybe the president have some roles for them to ensure that the ISIS is completely terminated in Syria completely before we disengage. So it is a tall order, but it seems like the President of the United States and the King of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, have vested interest to help this new government to become a peaceful Syria, not only with itself, because they have a lot to do within the minority groups, like you mentioned, the Druze and Kurds and so on. Also, to be at peace with Israel, and also they have some issues with Iraq and Lebanon. So it is a tall order. Time will tell.
Indeed. Well, General Kimmett, if we may have the last minute with you, when we're talking also about the remark by U.S. President Donald Trump about the timeline for negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran, he mentioned time is running out. What can you tell us on that, and to what degree do the Iranians understand the urgency of this matter?
Well, anybody that's ever negotiated with Donald Trump recognizes that he will always say time is running out. He will always try to put a time constraint on both his willingness to negotiate and his patience to negotiate, and that going beyond that time will only make things worse. But remember, this is a president that said he would solve the Ukraine war in one day. I wouldn't take too much of this. The Iranians are smart enough to recognize, as long as they can offer something at the table, he will stay at the table. So while that makes for great rhetoric, I don't think that there's any willingness to walk away from the table simply because of a time constraint.
Thank you, General Kimmett. Mr. Oren, when we're talking also about the Lebanese file, as Colonel Dahouk also mentioned, that Lebanon and Iraq are a challenge for the regime in Damascus today. It's also a challenge for the state of Israel, for Lebanon itself, which is faced with roughly 15,000 Shiite militias of Hezbollah armed to the teeth and well exercised, but nonetheless don't have the leadership or the capacity to rearm in the full extent of the matter in order to fulfill their aspirations in beyond Lebanese borders, but they do still have the potent force within Lebanese territory. What can you tell us about that?
So the only two nations bordering Lebanon are Israel and Syria. And if there is a sort of a siege or blockade on the naval routes to Lebanon and the air routes, and Syria will now do its part following the Trump-Ashara meeting in preventing Hezbollah from getting any assistance from Iran through Syrian territory, no more transshipment. Then new Lebanese president, General Joseph Aoun, the former army commander, can do his part under the watchful eyes of the monitoring group headed by an American general, and prospects are looking up.
Colonel Dahouk, President Trump highlighted his high hopes for success in Lebanon. It's an uphill battle.
It is. I'm not that optimistic about it because this rapprochement now with the Syrian president, it's a direct threat for the Hezbollah because Hezbollah, we're asking Hezbollah to disarm. At the same time, they're very worried about the Syrian government. There's a blood between the Hezbollah and the Sunni forces in Syria. So they're insecure. They're not willing to disarm unless they had some security guarantees from within Lebanon itself as well. So that and at the same time, seems even the Lebanese government, they're not as basically not necessarily proactive, pragmatic like the Syrian Ashara. Ashara was willing to sit down and discuss territorial issues with Israel without the withdrawal of Israel. So they're willing to do this. At this point, the Lebanese government is not willing to do that, and the Hezbollah is not willing to disarm unless some other guarantees comes to them. So it is very tense, difficult situation, and I'm not sure which way it's going to go.
Well, for all intents and purposes, Hezbollah is merely the extension of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards of Iran, and therefore they do need to maintain Tehran's calculus in its equation and modus operandi moving forward. But with that, I'd like to thank Colonel Abbas Dahouk, General Kimmett, and Mr. Oren, of course, for all of your valuable insights, and I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.